will have for the next few weeks. You'll get an idea. If he hits the ground running, then obviously you go, okay. But if not, then you could go, hey, maybe the Browns are only going to give him 15 snaps, 20 snaps. Maybe they this one. So that'll be interesting to watch. And, of course, you know what else that is? Clearly, he's been a winning quarterback, but not a fantasy quarterback. If you were in a deep league, you could have done worse. But if Josh Gordon does go to town, like Browns fans hope he does, 8 to 10 fantasy points a week to Brian Hoyer just because of that.
That's right. And in fact, a week ago, I added Hoyer in my in the league where I'm in the playoffs, and I'm starting him in the first round of the playoffs, which sounds bizarre. He's ranked in ESPN as the 21st best quarterback, and I think the guys at ESPN don't really realize, with all due respect to them, the impact that Josh Gordon will have on that team. Quarterback most weeks. He's been a 12 to 15 point guy.
Right.
I think 2/3 of the weeks that he's been playing. So you had a guy like Josh Gordon in the mix, and you add to the fact that he's playing the Falcons, who are not that good at pass defense. They're beatable. And you put that together and you say, Hoyer could easily get 300 yards and 3 TDs. There is a potential for that to happen. The Falcons have given up more yards in the air than any other team in the league. So a week ago, before we got to this week, because you always want to look, we've talked about this before, you always want to look a week ahead, because usually no one else is looking beyond the week in front of us. So if you're looking ahead right now to week 13, you're ahead of the game. So back in week 10, I was looking ahead to week 12. I picked up Hoyer because my quarterback is Matt Stafford, who frankly I'm tired of. I'm not tired of in an emotional way. I'm tired of in a statistical way. I'm tired of the fact that he hasn't thrown for more than 2 TDs all season. And I drafted him in the 4th round. I thought he'd be a top 5 quarterback. That's what he's been when healthy the last couple of years. So, I'm starting Hoyer over Matt Stafford, which sounds ridiculous, but I'm doing it based on matchup, and I'm doing it based on what I've seen. And what I've seen is Matt Stafford is going to be good for about 12 to 18 points. And I think that I'd rather take a chance on Hoyer on the hope that Josh Gordon bumps it to that next echelon.
Exactly. He's hit 300 yards the last couple of weeks, but he hasn't had the touchdowns to put those fantasy points over the top, and you're hoping that perhaps Josh Gordon adds to that there. All right, let's start looking at some other positions. Speaking of guys very poor against the offense, especially the pass offense, you got the Saints and their issues. Torrey Smith has already been getting himself untracked. You know, he had a tough start to the season. Well, Joe Flacco and him doing their thing. The Saints, one of the worst teams as far as giving up yards, averaging 15 yards a catch or something like that against the Saints. Chance to get unlocked here for sure.
The weeks of the season of Steve Smith's show. Torrey Smith had drawn the most defensive pass interferences of any receiver up through the first, 5 weeks. And you had to believe that was going to turn around. And I talked about it a lot on my blog. I talked about it on Twitter. Steve Smith was on pace for about 1,600 yards and 16 touchdowns. And that just wasn't feasible. Steve Smith was not going to have 1,600 yards and 16 touchdowns. He wasn't going to have 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. He's no longer at the point where he can continue to sustain that for an entire season, especially with Joe Flacco as quarterback. So, I drafted Torrey Smith too early in my league, but I drafted him in the 5th round, right between Matt Stafford and Mike Evans. You talk about a boom and a bust. And looks like a genius pick. Or 6th round looks like a bust pick. That's the way it works out in drafts. But Torrey Smith has been a constant. And now that he's on track, he is the true number 1 in Baltimore. And I agree with you. I mean, it's a run-first team to a large extent. But going up against the Saints, even without Brandon Cooks, it's still Drew Brees at home with a 4-6 record, the tied for lead in their division, in a must-win game. Of course, Drew Brees is more likely than not to step up, and Saints are more likely than not to put up 25-plus points. So you got to figure that Torrey Smith is a good bet to get a touchdown in return.
I'll tell you what, while we're talking about wide receivers, I got a question, and I don't know. You tell me. With you got Thomas, you've got Sanders, you've got injuries abound in Denver.
Yep.
Does Wes Welker's value go back to perhaps what you would hope it would be? Because somebody's got to catch passes from Peyton Manning, and that's obviously a very comfortable target for him. Do you expect perhaps a bounce back here for Wes Welker because of that?
The guy I would target is Cody Latimer.
Okay.
Cody Latimer is he's someone who, if Sanders and or Thomas sit out, I think Latimer is going to get more play time, and I think will demonstrate himself to be a better target for a better downfield target than Wes Welker. If you're in a PPR, you might take a chance on Welker, hope to get 4 or 5 catches, but I really think that people should be keeping an eye on Latimer.
Okay.
In this instance.
I was just wondering about that because that's somebody who, obviously has more of a name than what his production has been clearly this season. But I just wondered what your thoughts were on that. Who else, if guys are looking, especially if we're talking, waiver wire stuff. I know a lot of I laugh at these websites that have Josh Gordon listed as your number one guy you should be signing this week. Really? You think so? But I don't know of any leagues where Josh Gordon has been available at all, because everybody knew he was coming back in week 10. So, I believe he was drafted in our league, and in leagues that he wasn't drafted, he was signed the first week of the season. So, if you are in that league where Josh Gordon is still available, can I come play with you? Are you guys playing for money?
Right.
Because I want to get in your league, man. Where is Josh Gordon available? That I saw that on USA Today. I saw he was their number one waiver wire pickup for week 12, and I'm like, really? That took a lot of work to figure that one. But in their little write-up, they said he's widely available in many leagues, and I'm like, where? What leagues is Josh Gordon available in, man? Because you guys are not a deep leaguer, I'm guessing.
Yeah, more power to you if you're able to pick up a guy at this stage. But in 98% of leagues, Josh Gordon. He's been rostered for weeks and weeks now. In most leagues, he was drafted, especially the 12, 14, 16 team leagues. But in terms of receivers, a lot of people are always wondering, what kind of bargains receivers can you find out there? I mentioned Cody Latimer. People should also be looking at Jarvis Landry, the Dolphins' number 2 guy. I'm going to give you some ESPN rankings because I think it's important. People use rankings sometimes to make decisions. If you see a guy ranked 56th for the week at receiver, no one's going to think to start that guy. Well, Jarvis Landry is ranked 56th. I think he's going to get at least 10 points. I talk about it on my blog. Michael Floyd is ranked 55th. He had 2 TDs last week. Larry Fitzgerald might not play due to an injury, which would mean Floyd and John Brown would be getting most of the targets.
Yeah.
Michael Floyd is an elite receiver who unfortunately has been left out in the dark behind Brown and Fitzgerald for most of the year. That is not likely to continue. People can look up on Twitter a week ago. I said when Carson Palmer went down that history shows that Carson Palmer had a better rapport with Fitzgerald and that Stanton had a better rapport with Floyd than with Fitzgerald. So Floyd's value should go up. Fitzgerald should go down. Last week, 2 TDs for Floyd. I see that trend continuing. Pierre Garçon ranked 52nd best receiver. In the preseason, ESPN ranked him 14th best receiver. They were way off on that, but they're also way off on 52nd. Garçon has been forgotten in Washington behind Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah.
Washington has nothing to lose at this point. They're out of the playoffs. They are a mess offensively with Robert Griffin III at the helm. You got to believe that they're going to drop a game plan to make sure Garçon gets touches because he is a fairly dynamic receiver, and he thrives on those possession receptions to move the chains. And a couple more guys real quick. Kenny Stills ranked 46th on ESPN. Brandon Cooks goes down. Jimmy Graham. Some are saying it's going to be Marquise Colston. I think it's going to be Kenny Stills. He's had terrific games this season. I think he's had 4 games last year with at least 12 fantasy points. He's had a couple more this year. He's a legit threat to be a number 2 receiver on anyone's roster, and I think he's worth a flyer. And finally, Terrence Williams ranked 43rd. This guy had, I think, 5 TDs in the first 5 weeks, and now he hasn't done much of anything. It doesn't mean that he's not a good receiver. It just means that they've been getting the ball to other folks. So I think that Williams is a guy who's going to step up big time this week.
Tell you what, looking at some guys too. Kobe Fleener, I liked him. I had him last week in one of my one-day leagues or whatever. But Dwayne Allen, I don't know if there's a confirmation or not, but I know that he may have the dreaded high ankle sprain, which will open up some. And you got the natural connection anyway with Luck and Fleener, which I thought when they drafted Luck, I just remember going, that was, anybody could have drafted Luck. You got number one, he's a once in a lifetime guy. But to me, I thought, man, the smart bracket of that was when they took Fleener to go with it, because I'm like, man, bring him a safety blanket, the guy that he's used to from college, and that, but he had a big game last week. He had 144 on the ground, and with Allen being hurt, I think that's a guy to keep an eye on if he's available in your league. And then, of course, our man Al Blue from LSU, who had 156 yards last week against the Cleveland Browns. No touchdowns, though, which kind of made it a little less impressive than it should have been on a fantasy football level. But with Arian Foster coming back, Al Blue looks to go back to the bench, so I wouldn't get all crazy if you guys are into Al Blue. Anything else before we go, my man, PJ?
Yeah, I would just say keep an eye on Arian Foster's health. There's talk right before the show that Blue could still have a role in the offense. Houston has been making the mistake that many teams do of making the most of a good thing by riding him into the ground. And Arian Foster, as you might remember, had 55 carries in the first 2 games of the season.
Oh, yeah.
He was way overworked, and that continued after he got back from his week 3 or week 4, injury. So there's a chance that Houston will still work Alfred Blue into the mix this week, and people should be mindful that if they can just wait a couple of days to make that decision, they might find out if Blue's going to split carries, if they're going to go that far, then Blue becomes an interesting flex option for people desperate for a running back who could be good for 60 yards on the ground and 20 in the air. And you like those odds compared to some of the other guys that people are scrounging up these days.
And keep an eye on that come game time, because that's truly, Houston takes that right up to the wire most weeks here. And remember, speaking of down to the wire, you guys can always tweet us. You can tweet BJ at BJ Rudell, last minute tips and all of that stuff. Send your questions out. BJ, have a great one as we continue to march towards the playoffs, and we'll do this again next week.
Sounds great, J-Rock. Have a good one.
All right. You too, BJ Rudell, author of Fantasy Football for Winners. You guys can check him out on Facebook, Fantasy Football for Winners, and you can tweet with him at BJ Rudell, and he's here every Thursday, 1:30. Let's take a break, come back. Eddy Jansen, Cavaliers beat writer from More Than a Fan Cleveland, talks about the Cavs' tough loss last night to the Spurs. We'll talk about the first 10 games and more with Eddy Jansen, More Than a Fan Cleveland, Cavaliers beat writer, coming up next here on The Fix.
Do it for me, baby. Come on and shake it till you break. Don't stop now. Do it, move it. Shake your body now. Do it, keep it moving.
Portions of the Sports Fix brought to you by Fantasy Jocks. Looking to upgrade your league trophy? Check out fantasyjocks.com for championship belts, rings, trophies, and more. Fantasy sports lovers, you put so much time, hard work, and effort into playing week to week that it quickly stops being a fantasy and starts getting real. Real time spent making real decisions, creating real victory.
I'm the greatest man in the world!
And when the smoke clears, you want to show off those victories with a real prize. I mean, a really real prize. Nobody does that like Fantasy Jocks. The crew over at Fantasy Jocks have beautiful, high-quality, and heavy-duty championship belts, rings, trophies, and so much more for all your fantasy sports needs.
The trophy's 12 feet high, and it is glorious!
Football, baseball, hoops, you name it, they have it. Plus, they have awesome draft kits and party supplies to make all your preseason activities the envy of everyone. If your league needs a ring, belt, or trophy, or you want to upgrade what you already have, there's literally only one place to go. If you're going to be a fantasy jock, do it right.
It's mine, the most magnificent belt ever created, and it's mine.
With America's fantasy sports superstore, fantasyjocks.com.
Let's talk about the X's and O's of family entertainment. Every parent in Ohio knows the importance of being able to draw up an activity that'll get you out of the house for a couple of hours. But it needs to be affordable. It needs to be family-friendly. Above all, it needs to be fun. Now, Let's talk about high school sports. Bang for your buck, school sports provide the perfect game plan for your family. You'll enjoy all of the drama and excitement competitive sports offer. You'll be supporting the future leaders of our community in a meaningful way. Best of all, you can take the entire family without breaking the bank. Heck, you won't even dent it. Now, enough chalk talk. Let's get out there and